Hey everybody, it's Jason Blahai here. You guys know what time it is. Time to talk about current events in the online fitness community. And one of my subscribers has linked me a video from Alpha M about 5 exercises most guys do wrong at the gym. Now, for those of you who don't like this sort of videos, you saw the title of this video when you clicked on it. But for those of you who do, if you guys enjoyed the video or you enjoy this type of video, remember to click like down below. Offset that dislike bot that those 3 guys are running. And let's go ahead and put on my +5 out of speechcraft and let's talk about this. All right, Aaron over at Alpha M, one of those guys that a lot of times I'm critical of what he says. Other times he actually puts out some really good information. In the last video I covered of his, he talked about the big 3, strength, everything else, that he really wished he had focused more on it when he was younger, that he's starting to do heavy squat, bench, and deadlift now. For me as a power lifter, I can appreciate that. I'm also in the same age category he is. But I do believe in lifting heavy, and that is the basis of my training, is getting strong at all the classic lifts, and obviously getting as strong and as thick as possible with all my other exercises. But today's video I'm going to be pretty critical of, because I feel like a lot of what he said in this one are completely irrelevant, and in some cases it's not even the best advice for maximizing hypertrophy when you look at basic biomechanics of the exercises and muscles involved. The problem is that he got so caught up and a lot of bro lore and what bodybuilders over the years have promoted, that he's not looking at basic physiology and the functions of the muscle. And that's fine. It's not like you're not going to gain muscle doing it either way. It's just that some of what he's advising is good form might be taking some of the actual muscle fiber recruitment out that you could be getting. You could be getting more out of the exercise by doing it the opposite of what he said, or in some cases it just simply doesn't matter. The other thing that kind of bothered me is that he turned it into a supplement ad. He started talking about after you train, you need a post-workout shake, you can buy this. Completely irrelevant. That's old science, it's junk science. The supplement industry funded it. Most experts today, including the top sports nutritionists, all the people even who have credentials in this, who are researchers in this, who train themselves, are saying that it's not actually based on reality. Post-workout recovery is not really that big of a deal, other than for ultra elite athletes who have perfect training, extremely intense, high volume training, who are trying to glean that last 0.5% difference. The majority of you out there are simply not training hard enough or with enough volume, because you probably have jobs and careers and school and things like that. You really can't train that hard. You're limited. It's not a full-time gig for you. You're not going to see any measurable difference from it. But over to the point we're coming to with these 5 exercises. First one he brought up was lateral raises. Now, I'm going to compliment one of the things that he did. What I'm going to say is that the tip he gave is completely irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant to the point. But what he did do correctly is he didn't do the really crappy normal bodybuilder way of saying, hey, turn your pinky up. Notice his thumb was up slightly. That's actually the correct way to do this exercise, because what happens if you turn the pinky up, you actually crush the glenoid inside your shoulder joint over time, and that's why you feel the burn. Again, guys talk about feeling a burn. Well, it may not be in the muscle you're feeling the burn. That deep burn you get inside there when you do that is actually the glenoid, which is inside your shoulder joint, and you're actually damaging it over time. So it's a good way to destroy your shoulders, to do it bodybuilder style, where they turn the pinky up. You need that thumb up slightly, or thumb all the way up. That's how I do them. Because yes, I do them as a power lifter. We need big shoulders. It's helpful to our sport. So the point he made is that guys really use too heavy of a weight and they cheat a little bit. But truth be told, on an exercise like that, it doesn't actually matter. It only matters if you're losing the eccentric rep because you're going so heavy. So in other words, he said, they just come up and back down. Okay, if you come up and you just drop it back down immediately without any control, he's probably right. You're not getting as much out of it. But if you're using a little bit of body English and you are using a heavier weight than you could do really strict, but then you kind of control it on the eccentric rep, and you're still reaching the same amount of rate of perceived exertion, and then the muscle fails, you're not going to see any measurable difference in hypertrophy. You're not going to see any real measurable difference in terms of muscle fiber recruitment. It really is a moot point. In other words, it literally comes down to personal preference, but from like a motor unit recruitment pattern, you're not going to see a difference between the two scenarios he just described, unless you are not controlling it all on the eccentric. But if you're still getting a somewhat heavier eccentric and there's any control near the top, you're still fatiguing the same muscle fibers the same. And from a hypertrophy perspective, that's really all that matters. And I'm going to assume most of you guys who are doing these lateral raises, your goal is not specific carryover to another lift. You're not concerned about specific performance elements. You just want your delts bigger. You're not going to see a difference between the two. So I'm not saying what he said is right or wrong. I'm saying it just is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. You'll get the same results from either one as long as at least there's control on the eccentric rep. Next up, he brought up the dips, and I'm going to go over to the same thing. He's saying, look, the way a lot of people do the dips, which is one of my favorite exercises, and by the way, I think the weighted dip is a great exercise. Unless I didn't say body weight dip, I said weighted dip, because I'm sorry, you guys, unless you're 350 pounds, you're not going to get much workload on a weighted dip. I mean, realistically speaking, on just a body weight dip. If you're a smaller guy, you're going to need to stack a lot of weight on there over time and get stronger at it to get real progress on it. But he pointed out basically which was elbow tuck versus flare. And he kind of said, look, you need to have your elbows out a little more at the bottom. You're going to get more pectoral recruitment, and it's going to be easier on your shoulder joint. That's arguable. We could absolutely argue from a biomechanics that depending upon your individual anatomy, the flare that he's doing could be worse on your shoulder joints. For other people, it's going to be worse on that. Here's what I would say. That's something that you need to assess based upon how you feel as you're doing the exercise. Check your ego at the door. Learn an appropriate range of motion on it. Don't stand around doing partials and half-ass reps. And don't go so deep on it that you damage your shoulder. You don't need for your tricep at the top to be more than about 90 degrees. Right? You want it parallel with the floor, parallel with the bars you're above. You don't need to go lower than that. That's actually what hurts your shoulders the most on this lift. And just keep in mind that it's a potentially dangerous exercise if not performed correctly. But realistically, acting like on a weighted dip, that if you're doing the normal range of motion that you could actually remove either the pectorals or the triceps as a primary mover, that's just not reality. The amount of elbow flare is going to affect that the least. The amount of torso lean is probably going to affect that more so in terms of the ratios. It's still the way that he performed it is still really considered to be largely the tricep dominant variation because his torso was almost upright. When you lean forward more, it becomes a little more pectoral dominant. But any way that you do a weighted dip, if the range of motion is through the correct range of motion, you're not going to be able to not use both the triceps and pecs as primary builders. It's just not possible. Up next, he talked about curls, and this is one of the things that people get wrong, both curls and tricep extensions. He's tried to basically have people lock their elbows into their side, and I get it because he's trying to chase continual tension. The problem is that continual tension is a bodybuilding myth. It's not based on human physiology. And he's like, look, have your elbow at the side and just come up, and don't come up like this. Now, I will say if you're curling your hand all the way in, that's a bit of a problem, but coming up like this, that shoulder rotation is one of the functions of the bicep. And I'm not saying you can't build big biceps doing them super strict the way that he said. I'm not saying that. So I want that to be clear. I'm not saying it's wrong per se, but he's trading bicep function for continual tension in this case. A little bit of travel up of the shoulder actually recruits one of the functions of the long head of the bicep. That actually is part of it. So actually, if you have your elbow completely stationary at your side, your upper arm, and you only move the elbow, and that's the only joint that moves, and you try to turn it into a pure single joint exercise, you are losing one of the functions of the bicep. Right? Out of the two heads on it, the upper and lower head and everything, one of the functions of the long head is that actual shoulder travel. So that's actually part of the function of the bicep, and there's a reason a lot of guys choose to do their biceps that way who are big and strong. Furthermore, if you're going to talk about strength, as he said, just about size, if you're strength, you can ignore that, and that's where I'm going to agree. A lot of people do curls to also increase their chin-up and pull-up strength as an assistance movement for it. Well, if you think about the same shoulder motion that happens on a chin-up or a pull-up, you need to strengthen that function on the curl if you want it to carry over. So again, it becomes largely about what you're chasing. And then we come over to that same point with the tricep extensions. He did the same thing of, look, you need to go slow and keep your arms tucked to your sides. That's not correct. You actually need your shoulders to come up. You need that shoulder extension if you want to recruit all the functions of the tricep, because the long head back here, that is part of the function of the long head. If you only move your elbow on a tricep extension, the long head of the tricep gets under work, and it's actually the biggest of the three heads. So you actually want some shoulder travel. And depending on how you do it, it's easier on the tendons around your elbow. So one reason you see so many bodybuilders who complain about tendonitis in their elbows is the way they perform their extensions. It's not their bench pressing. Like they're scared that their bench lockouts are causing it. No, it's tucking those elbows too hard on their tricep extensions that's causing tendonitis. And then when they bench heavy, they feel it. You find power lifters who bench heavy don't get that if they don't do that with their tricep extensions. Locking out heavy on a bench press doesn't seem to actually cause it. That's where you feel the tendonitis that you've already developed. So that's a problem there. Then the last thing he brought up was the flies. And actually that one I'm going to say his advice was pretty good. I'm not really going to be critical of that. I'm not a big fan of flies. I don't think most people need flies. They're a controversial exercise, but the point he did make of the people who lock their elbows out at the side instead of a little bit of bend and keeping the bend consistent if you decide you need a single joint exercise for your pecs, I'm going to agree with him there. That's a point where we're talking about a strain and an injury issue. Locking your elbows on a fly is actually a recipe for disaster. You are greatly increasing your chances of getting hurt. And it's just ridiculous. If you're actually getting hurt and injured because you're doing little small exercises in a silly manner, that's just ludicrous. I'm going to say if you're going to get hurt, at least hopefully, because hopefully nobody gets hurt. I don't want anyone to ever get hurt lifting heavy. But let's be realistic here. I would rather it almost be something that goes wrong with a big lift. If you're injuring yourself because you're straining something due to a really crappy shoulder angle on a little tiny exercise like a fly or a side lateral, that's just ludicrous. Because injuries happen. When we train hard and we train heavy, injuries are going to happen eventually. There's always a chance. They happen even when you do everything right. But they damn sure should never happen on a little fluff exercise. And again, that piece of advice he gave you there is a good one. You should absolutely not be locking your elbows on a fly. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.